Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Kevin Moore Show. Now, if you want to stay up to date with all my latest videos, just click that subscribe button, and this really helps to support the show. So, if you're new to the show, I interview guests from a spiritual perspective, covering mainstream and alternative subjects, real-life inspirational stories, true crime, self-improvement, and much more. Now, on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Ron Miscavige, who is the father of David Miscavige, the leader of the Church of Scientology. Now, Ron, along with his wife, escaped from the Church of Scientology's international headquarters in California on March the 25th, 2012. Ron did not especially care for publicity. His aim after leaving Scientology was simply to get on with his life. The other thing Ron did not care for was the situation that his two daughters have been cut off with contact from him owing to the Church of Scientology's policy of disconnection, whereby church members are forced to cut off all communication with anyone they deem to have been critical of the church. Now, having been separated from his daughters, as well as his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Ron made the decision to stand up against the church's practice of tearing families apart and to reveal the abuse. The result was his book, Ruthless: Scientology, My Son David Miscavige and Me. Ron Miscavige, thank you for joining me.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm happy you invited me.
Well, Ron, I'm just so happy to have you here and, to sort of cover the story from a different perspective as well, to look at your spiritual path as well. And I think just to begin with, if you can just sum up your journey so far, just for the audience who may, not have come across your story.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what it was. If I were to sum it up, since I was a little kid, I had been looking for truth about life and livingness. I thought I found it in Scientology, and I latched onto it and gave it my all. As a matter of fact, I got my whole family in. And then I even went further and joined what's called a Sea Organization, which is a very dedicated bunch of people to this supposed goal that Scientology has. Worked there for 26 and a half years, and on a gradient basis, began to see the truth of it, that it wasn't what they said it was. And I escaped. They punished me by taking away my children, my two daughters, their children. So I substantially lost my family, except for one son and one granddaughter. And then I decided, well, if you're going to shut me up, that's not the way to do it. So I decided to write a book. Wrote a book on May 26, 2016. It came out on the New York Times bestseller list as #1 for nonfiction. It was #1 for the month of June that year. And I did a lot of interviews on national television on various shows promoting the book prior to it coming out. One of the interviews I did was with 2020, where I spent 6 hours in Philadelphia getting interviewed, 2 hours in Milwaukee, a total of 8 hours. They took sound bites of it. I was on the screen for maybe 20 minutes. And the story they tried to promote was, I could be right, I could be wrong. Scientology could be right, they could be wrong. And at that point, I knew the only way I would get the story out is to start my own podcast, which I did. And I interview other people who I give them an hour. Usually the shows are between 30 minutes and an hour, to tell their whole story without me throwing them under the bus or interrupting them or trying to put my 2 cents in. And that brings me to you. And here I am today. So it all started with me as a little kid wondering, I wonder if I could find out more about this thing called life, and them trying to shut me up. And it resulted in the opposite of me speaking out. That's a real short version, but I got it out.
Yes, you did. And obviously I've watched you on a few different shows in the past. I think Joe Rogan was the first time I saw you. And yeah, it was quite incredible what you had to say as well. So before we get into your story, right, what is your understanding of what life's all about right now, in the sense that you went onto this sort of spiritual quest, in a sense, right, to understand the deeper
Yeah,
meaning of life, right? If I said to you, are you a soul having a human experience, could you go down that road?
I absolutely would agree with you. I absolutely would agree with that concept. And the reason I agree with it is because I think that is true. It is truth, kind of truth revealed, I mean, man has gotten to the point where, in many cases, not necessarily in the East, where they still hold on to their beliefs that man is a spiritual being. But many people think somehow the whole universe started with a big bang, which boggles my mind. But I've also come to the conclusion over my research that people will believe what they want to believe, whether it has to do with truth or fiction or anything. They'll believe what they want to believe. Well, if it was a big bang, what was there for it to big bang into? The only answer I've come up with that works for me, and I look at life, and miracles happen all the time. I'll give you an example of a miracle. You could take a little acorn, all right, a little inert object, put it in the ground, and some years later, you will have a tree. Now, you can put one kernel of corn in the ground, nourished properly with the soil. You will get a stalk of corn, all ears of corn, all having hundreds of these little kernels on, each one of them capable of sprouting forth life. Now, I call that nature. And if you want to talk about a God or God, I refer to it as a universal mind. I could say God, but
I like that.
it's just,
Yeah, I like the
I
universal
refer to
mind.
it
Yeah.
as a universal mind. Now, where isn't it? That's my question. There isn't
Or
any,
what is not God?
right. In other words, if you look at that, the entire thing is God. The entire thing is the universal subconscious mind. I'm in it. I'm part of it. I'm a spiritual awareness unit. I don't have any bodily form except this form I call Ron Miscavige that I'm pretending to be in order to play this game of life on this particular planet. And we're all, Shakespeare said it, we're all actors on the stage acting out a role. Basically, that's a paraphrase. I don't know exactly what the words were.
It's pretty much like that.
But pretty much. And in England, they're a wonderful sense of humor. When I lived there over 2.5 years, one guy told me, he says, well, the joke here in England is that Shakespeare didn't exist. It was another fellow with the same name, which I love. But getting back to my personal realization is that we're all part of God. And I don't know a better way to put it or expand into more than that.
I'm with you on that. And do you think that where do you think you're going to go when you cross over? I mean, have you considered that much? That obviously there's a next adventure after this, and this is not the end.
Okay, I'm going to tell you of a story that happened to me to illustrate this point. So let me diverse, but I'm not really diversing. I'm getting to the point here. When I was in Scientology, I used to help them to get people to do services and help them to people to join Scientology. And this is in Philadelphia, and it was down in the center part of the city on Race Street. And there was a guy that used to come into the organization and look at books and look around. And nice guy. And one of the registrars, which is it's a salesman, they sell services. They call them registrars. Jeff Battershaw. One day he said to me, Ron, listen, this guy comes in and he never does anything. He'll buy a book or look around. His name is Charlie Kress. See what you can do. Just sound him out, see what he's up to. And I said, sure, fine. That's good with me. So now, and I got to take a hat here. A little water to keep those vocal cords. Now, So I walked over to him, introduced myself, and I'm Ron Miscavige. Yeah, I'm Charlie Kress. Hey, good meeting you. So we started talking, and I can tell you right now, in one instant, we hit it off. It was like, man, it seems like I've known this guy always. So after a while, I said, look, why don't we get a cup of coffee? And there's a McDonald's around the corner. So we walked out of the organization, went over to McDonald's, ordered a coffee. The girl brought the coffee over. I took out my money. He took out his money. I noticed he had a silver dollar in his change. I had a silver dollar money clip. I said, Charlie, what is the date on that silver dollar? He looked at it and told me. I took mine out. I showed it to him. It was the same date. I said, Charlie, this is what we agreed upon in a prior existence, that the way we would know each other is to have an unusual coin of the day with the same date. And he said, oh, no. We laughed, and he became a bosom buddy. I helped him to get up the bridge. Now, my point is this. Let's say you die. Now, you go back into the overall spiritual kingdom, whatever we want to call that, but you lose all memories of this identity. This identity, meaning Ron Miscavige. That identity, I didn't even know the name I had, but I knew that that's what we agreed upon. Now, when you were to reincarnate, you get another identity, you wouldn't necessarily have any memory of anything as that spiritual awareness unit, because that is the thing that goes on. The physical coat unit that you're using as a communication factor is gone. When they say you only live once, well, nothing could be truer than that, because you, as this identity you're pretending to be, you can see it dies, it gets cremated or stuck in a box and put underground. Who in the hell is going to believe that thing is going to come to life and live again? So now, if there would be no reason for me to know him other than that agreement we made in that incarnation, I would have had no idea that I knew him before.
Yeah, and I do think that there are some things that are destined in this reality, and I think there's lots of free will as well. Like, maybe you get to a destiny point, but there's still free will whether you're going to go that way or that way. Do you know what I mean? You've still got the free will to do stuff.
You have a choice. As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I agree.
Do you think that when you look back at your journey that you've been on, and the relationship that you don't really have with David right now, David Miscavige, the head of Scientology, do you think that you could look at it from a spiritual perspective and say, you guys came here to have this experience maybe, or to learn from each other? And what do you think you're learning from each other?
Well, I don't know if it was destined to go this way. I think a good friend of mine said this to me one time, and I think it's true. You're dealt a hand. How you play it is up to you. That's your free will. You see what I'm saying? In other words, I really enjoyed his company as a little kid. I got to tell you. I mean, he was just a little spark. He was born with a severe case of asthma. I did my best to try to help him. Listen, Kevin, I used to try all kinds of things to try to help him get his breath, because when you're a little kid and you're having an asthmatic attack, as a parent, you think that this little child is going to die. They can't breathe. They can breathe in, but they can't get it out. You see what I'm saying? And I tried various things. I could go into some of them, but I've told them all on prior shows. Probably the most memorable one was in the wintertime, and I lived in New Jersey, southern part of New Jersey, and real cold weather outside, and he's having this asthmatic attack. I took him upstairs into the upstairs bathroom, We had a shower bathroom up there, and took off all of his clothes, took off all of my clothes, held him in my arms, went in the shower, put on the warm water. I said, "Now, Dave, I'm with you, man. I'm not trying to hurt you." Meanwhile, he's turning blue. I turned the hot water off, and when that cold water hit us, I'll tell you, man, it was like getting struck with lightning. Immediately, he started breathing in and out. I took him out of the shower, wiped him down with a nice towel, gave him a hug and a kiss, and that was one of the ways I got him to breathe out. It is goddamn shocking. I'll tell you, these people who jump in a lake of frozen water, you got to be a little nuts to do that, because I'll tell you, there are people who do it, though. They cut holes in the ice and they jump in there. What the fuck? You might as well close your hands in a car door,
I know, right? And that's just about the same when you do that as well. That's a bit of a shock. Yeah. Okay. So.
Well, wait a minute. No, wait. Before, let me just finish that concept, because now that was David Miscavige as a little child. And I loved him, and I just enjoyed his company. He could go over a doorway, and the little thin coping, I'd put him up there, put his fingers on it, and hang from it. That's how strong he was as a little kid. But he metamorphosed from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. And you're one of your fellow countrymen back in the 1800s, Lord Acton. Everybody knows. Well, I guess almost everybody knows it. Maybe not everybody, but the quote is exactly: "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." And I think once David got in the Sea Organization, pulled off things that nobody else could do, that gave him power, and that changed him.
I do feel I've interviewed a lot of people about this idea that when we go back home, we go through what's called a life review, and we get to experience, how other people received us in the best and worst of times. Do you know what I mean? And to review, have an honest review of yourself must be very difficult sometimes. And I guess David's not wanted to face that, has he? The things that he's done.
Probably not. But I should mention this, because people would gain from doing this. I have a podcast. It's called TheRealRonMiscavige.com. I say that because those words, TheRealRonMiscavige.com, unless you put that in and select that, and it comes up with a gentleman sitting on a bench in front of a body of water, and it's saying, "It must stop." If you don't get that, that's not my podcast. I say that because the church some years ago bought 500 variations of my name. So no matter what you put in, unless you put in exactly what I just said, it'll take you to a hate site on me, a character assassination
A smear
site.
campaign.
Okay?
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. So if you put that in, and it's where it says watch Ron's YouTube show, there's a show that I do called Story Time or Life Lessons, either one. And if you go there, the last two I did, one was Attitudes and States of Mind. Another one is called The Will versus the Imagination. These are short shows. They're only about 6 or 7 minutes. And people who watch this will profit immensely if they just listen to it and have that mindset. But on one of those shows, I say the hardest thing you'll ever have to do. Do you know what it is?
Forgive?
No. Admit you are wrong.
Oh, yeah, well, that's just as difficult, or maybe the most difficult thing. Yeah, well, that...
I am telling you.
That takes a lifetime for some people. Yeah.
I know.
Or never.
But if you can, that's right, or never. That's correct. But I am telling you, until that happens, you can't ever get yourself in a position to get out of what you got into thinking you were right. You'll defend that almost to the death, and to your detriment, might I say. Okay?
And that's what Scientology members do, of course, in some respect.
You got it. Yes, and I'm going to tell you one of the things that happened to me, and a dear friend of mine by the name of Fernando Gamboa, who was also in this Sea Organization, and him and his wife left, and we've stayed in communication. And one day he said to me, "Let's face it, Ron, we were conned. I got through the conversation with him, and I'm walking to my kitchen. I'm looking that way now. There's a hallway, and there's a full-length mirror. And I stopped in front of the mirror, and I said to myself, "You were conned." That was the turning point on my mind, because then I started to realize, now, wait a minute. What am I defending here to try to be right? I peeled it back to how, when you first get in Scientology, there are courses such as the communication course that are immensely helpful if you really learn it and you understand the anatomy of a communication. You can handle life better. You think, whoa, this works, And there's some other courses that help you get over various things, transgressions in your life. So you get the mind attitude, this works. Now something will be introduced a little later on that you don't quite get, and maybe it sounds off, but you say to yourself, well, everything's been correct so far. I'll accept this. And at that point, you're on your way. Then you find yourself studying 2.5 hours a day, 5 times a week, self-hypnotizing and changing your mind into something that wouldn't necessarily go down if you walked off the street and started doing it right there. So after all of this, now you have a platen of all these things you think are true, many of which are baloney. But unless you say, I was wrong, you're on your way. And I'm telling you, when I did that started changing my life, Kevin.
Well, I think people should read your book as well, because even at the I enjoyed your book, right? But at the very end, that last final message that you give in the book to your son, oh my God, that hit me so hard when I read that. I was like, Jesus, I wasn't expecting that.
I know. And I'll tell you something, you got to do that. And I'm not going to tell it. If you want to know what it is, read the book. That's what I say. Because that's all part of leading a life that's, well, way better than you ever could have lived before. Way better.
I wonder if he's been told that last message, David. I wonder if he's received from anyone that's what you put in there.
I don't know. And I may never know. He's surrounded by people who cater to him, who accede to his every demand. He leads a life of like a king without necessarily having money or taxes to pay, because if he says to somebody, I wouldn't mind having that kind of a car, somehow they'd work out so he'd get one of those cars and they just present it to him.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, am I right to say this, $1 billion operation, the Church of Scientology, cash-wise?
It's been estimated by people who would know, because they worked on finance lines, that they're worth about $3 billion. Yeah. Now, that's a lot of money, when these days, mostly what they're concerned about is getting donations, not delivering services. There used to be a course that was called the briefing course. There was over 400 lectures on there delivered by L. Ron Hubbard. And that's what you had to go through in order to finish this course. That course is no longer being delivered. And why would you want to deliver a course? Because here, you donate, you become a patron. I take a piece of paper that says you're a good guy, give it to you. That's the end of it. If you can get that amount of money for handing somebody a piece of paper, says that they're a patron Victor Morius, a patron Diamond, Platinum, it's insane. Yet, as I said earlier, people believe what they want to believe. They go on the stage and get this, and people clap. Oh, aren't you wonderful? Get a piece of paper and a bowling trophy that says you're great. So why deliver service when you can get money that easy? Now, when you can get it that easy, what do you have to spend it on? They have hot and cold running attorneys. They take somebody takes them to court. Sometimes they'll have 2 or 3 or 4 attorneys in there. Probably each one of them getting about $1,000 an hour. What the hell is the difference? You turn on the faucet, money comes out,
How many times, obviously, you're doing this type of show quite a bit in different ways on your own show. I mean, how many times do you think of David and sort of have flashbacks of memories and stuff, or do you only try to
I,
look forward?
I don't get flashbacks on it. I'll be honest with you. I've come to the conclusion that what's going to be is going to be, and that's something I'd have to change him in order for it to be what I'd like it to be, which would be to be in communication with him and and promising things that you can't deliver. Some of the things that they promise in Scientology have never been delivered. Yet they keep on collecting money for it and having people do it. There are things that could be delivered, and when they're delivered, they are what, as an example, the communication course, all right, or these lower level entrance points type of course. They would have to change their whole mindset in order to really survive as an ethical group. And number two, skip this thing about them being a religion. I mean, they're not in any way a religion. There's no deity in that. There's no belief in a God. In Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard says that you and your fellow man started the universe. That you started it. In my wildest imagination, I can't imagine me, if I started this, don't remember that I started the thing. And when you look at the width and breadth of the universe, it's inconceivable that's a true statement. Yet that's what's being fed, and there's no such thing as a God as in Scientology.
No, and we're going to get into that as well. Yeah, it's a very interesting journey that you've taken, and what keeps you going doing these type of interviews?
Well, look, I could have said, okay, well, they took my kids away from me. That's the end of it. I'll just get on with my life. I feel duty bound to do these. I feel duty bound actually to try to get people on and tell their story and expose what they do to more and more people and save people from going in and thinking that it's going to be a wonderful experience when it could be a tragedy. You could end up losing your family, losing your job, losing your friends, because they will get to a point in order to censure you as a being, they'll declare you a suppressive person, which you're like a non-entity at that point, you know?
That's right. What do you think that you've gone through on this journey in the sense of, that could you say to yourself that you are grateful for what you've experienced and maybe you wouldn't change it because it's taught you so much about yourself?
No, I couldn't say that. But I could say this. I do look at it as an experience. I don't sit around and say, "Oh me, gee, look what happened to me." That is a complete waste of time. Listen, the end product of regretting something, the end product will be having regretted something. There's an English expression, it's the square root of you know what. 0. To sit around and think, oh, look what they did. Oh, look at that. It's a complete waste of time. And it actually what it does is it perpetuates what they did, because they may have done it to you, but now you have kept it up.
So there are no mistakes then, just experiences.
Well, you could say it's a mistake, but that mistake was part of my experience. I don't mean to be correcting you on it, but that's how I feel.
I want how you feel.
You could make a mistake, but then you say, okay, well, I made a mistake. That was that experience, You could take a left-hand turn thinking you should have taken a right-hand turn. You've gone the wrong way for a half an hour. You say, Jesus Christ, I made a mistake. Go back. That's the end of it.
I don't know if I believe in karma, but I wonder if there are such things as past lives, and maybe past lives are actually happening right now. Maybe they're not past as we think they are, right? And what if you are correcting something that happened in some other experience, and this has been part of something that you needed to experience?
Well, I think anything is a possibility. I think anything that you can conceive of could be a reality, like in a past life or even in a future life. I mean, I don't limit myself to just, well, here I am, I live in a house, I wake up and that's life. No, I think there's more to life than that. There's too many things that have happened to me in my life that I can't put in a book and say, oh, that was a coincidence. Oh, that was a coincidence. Oh, that was a coincidence. All right. And if you start looking at it, I mean, simple things like I'm going to call my wife. I pick up the phone. She calls me. Or I dial her and run. I had my hand on the phone. Just basic, simple things like that. People being able to communicate somehow over a great distance without a telephone or a physical means,
Absolutely. Well, okay, just very quickly, let's just touch on Scientology then. Now, L. Ron Hubbard, I'm quoting here, but he had a sort of sincere desire to see people become happier, improve their lives, society, and better understand themselves. And part of that technique was using auditing, which is like a counseling technique, isn't it, in some way? Do you think that's what his sincere desire was to help people?
Okay. Let me say this. I think there was the good L. Ron Hubbard and the bad L. Ron Hubbard. I do think, well, it's been attributed to him saying, if you really want to make money, start a religion. There's too many people who have said that he actually said this for it to be a lie. On the other hand, I do think he actually had that goodness in him that he would come up with ways to help people, or else he wouldn't have come up with many of these simple ways. And then the bad thing about him is he couldn't stand any criticism or anything that would mess with his religion. So he came up with things like declaring people suppressive persons. The government was bad. The police were bad. Psychiatry was bad. In other words, there are so many things, like as an example, in the ethics book, it is a crime for you to appear in court against a Scientologist. That Scientologist could have robbed the bank and you saw him doing it. But if you go to court and you were to say, yeah, I saw him doing it, that would be a crime on your part. So when I say there's the good and there's the bad, honestly, I really think it's inherent in every one of us. We could either go off the bad side or the good side. I think it's a choice that you have to make. Because look, don't kid yourself. There are times when anybody would think, Jesus, man, I'd like to strangle that guy for what he did. And you think, hey, wait a minute, what the hell am I talking about? Some people go with that. Other people say, hey, wait a minute, where's that thought coming from? And truthfully, I'll tell you, if you were to look into these books that I've talked about before, and the ones that were written by Atkinson, Charles Hannell, there's none of them, late 1800s, early 1900s, I will tell you something. A lot of the things that L. Ron Hubbard has in Scientology were almost copy and pasted out of those, except he put a different twist to it. As an example, there's a thing he calls the reactive mind, which never sleeps. It records 24 hours a day, everything that happens to you. They called it the subconscious mind. It is the mind that, as an example, runs your body. I mean, Kevin, do you think every minute, heartbeat, heartbeat, heartbeat? Of course not. Food digest. That subconscious mind runs the entire body, the blood flow, the digestion, all these things. It's a help to you. I'll give you an example. There are people who have used this, including me. I will have a problem that I'm trying to solve. I can't quite get it. I'll go to sleep, wake up in the morning, the answer will come to me.
Right, you sleep on it and you put it out there to the universe. Yes,
it's like, well, it is magic, and if you want to term something magic, but I say it's like magic. Otherwise, people think it's bullshit, because magic these days is misdirection of attention. And that's how it works. You can pull a trick because you've diverted somebody's attention elsewhere. Did I answer that question?
You did absolutely. And I mean, there's just so much I want to get into. There's so much to your story that's really, really good. And I know you've told a few of these stories before, but I think it's important. With L. Ron Hubbard, did he mix with some famous occultist people?
Well, I heard that he read Blavatsky, but there was another one. I think his name was Crowley.
Aleister Crowley, yes.
Aleister Crowley, and they did some experiments where they tried to produce a moon child. They got dressed up in these costumes and shit, and you have sex with somebody, and that's supposed to produce a moon child. Look, as far as that's concerned, I've never dug into that deeply. So I couldn't give you an answer other than, I read about it, and I don't want to give you bullshit here.
No, absolutely. Now, you must have watched, have you watched any of the documentaries on Scientology that are out there?
Such as?
Well, just any. I mean, is it something you've done?
The Truth Rundown or something?
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I watched those, yeah.
Yeah. There was one film I saw not too long ago, which was called The Master. I don't know if you saw that film. It was loosely based on Scientology.
I did see it. Yeah, I did see it.
What did you think of that film?
Yeah, I got no thoughts either way. I thought it was close to the truth, but not quite what happened. But good acting on the people who were in it, I can tell you that.
Yeah,
and,
who was it?
It probably portrayed LRH as the way he was, I mean, who knows? I mean, I never met L. Ron Hubbard. The only reason I know of him is because of his lectures, and when I did an album in England in 1974, it came out in 75. I sent him a copy, and he said to his PR public relations person, "See if you can get that guy. He's a great trumpet player." She never got to me, and I'm glad she didn't, because I foolishly may have goddamn joined them at that point, and that would have been a mistake, But other than that, I had no personal doings with them, and so this stuff with Aleister Crowley, I only know from reading about it.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to, just to see what your take was on that. So, when David was, when you was all, as a family, the kids were young then, so we've got 2 boys, 2 girls, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, when I read your book, your relationship with Loretta, your first wife, I get what you're very honest in the book. You say, there was many explosive sort of, confrontations. You argued a lot, but you guys still made it work. You made the relationship work.
Yeah, and that basically was for the sake of the children. I guess neither of us wanted to give up and have the children be, have no father. And but I honestly, I'll tell you, Kevin, we should have never gotten married. I mean, it was like oil and water. There's certain things that, I pity her. I pity myself. It was a relationship that was a struggle. I mean, the day before we got married, I said to her, "Listen, do you really think we should get married? Because we argue all the time." And she says, "Well, it'll get better when we get married." And of course, the opposite was true. But we did, raise them in just to the point where, they were able to fend for themselves, I guess. And I got them in Scientology because I thought that would be the most survival thing for them to learn. She agreed, by the way. She wholeheartedly accepted Scientology along with me. And that's the reason we went to England, is I put my family on Scientology courses like that, took them out of school, sold my house, everything I had, carte blanche, went to England,
But it was David that when he was 16, that after having got rid of the asthma through an auditing process, that convinced him that he was destined then to sort of enter into Scientology with your permission.
Yeah, well, actually, precisely what happened is I kind of dipped my fingers in Scientology earlier than when I got in formally. And it was at a place in South Jersey, in Woodbury, New Jersey. Frank Ogle was the guy's name. He had a cafeteria. And I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, he'd have a get-together with people, and we'd all sit around a table and talk, and he would talk Scientology and stuff and communication stuff, And then I thought, because David was still having attacks. I thought, maybe Frank could do something. And I said, Frank, could you help my son? He said, yeah, bring him down. So I took him down. He introduced himself to Frank. Frank went in and took him into an auditing, which is another word for counseling session. 45 minutes later, he came out smiling. I said, David, how did it go? He says, Dad, I'm handled. And he never had another severe attack as a child. He had some attacks, but they were mild. It was never the way it was before. At that point, I thought, you know what? I got to get my whole family involved. And that was key to me taking my whole family down to what they called a mission in those days. Well, it was called the franchise in those days. And we'd go down there on Saturday, and I got my kids in Scientology on services. So now he's 16 years old. He's 15 years old, and he's in high school. And I come home from work one day, and he's laying in his bedroom, kind of holding his head in his hands, laying down. I said, hey, Dave, what's up, man? He says, Dad, I don't want to go to school anymore. I said, what happened? He said, look, the kids don't listen to the teacher. Almost all of them smoke pot. Nobody goes there to learn. I want to help L. Ron Hubbard. Now, I actually thought to myself, wow, he's 15. But I can remember when I was 17 years old, I met a United States Marine recruiter in my hometown, and I spoke to him for about an hour, and I decided I want to become a Marine. So my dad had a sign for me. So I took the recruiter up to my dad's insurance office, and I says, Pop, I want to join the Marine Corps, and I need you to sign for me. He said, Ronnie, are you sure you want to do this? They're the first ones in. In other words, they put themselves in the line of fire. And I said, yeah, Dad, I want to become a Marine. So he signed for me. Now, I can remember going to Parris Island on a train from Philadelphia. Parris Island is in South Carolina. We swore in Philadelphia, go down there, get in boot camp. The first night in boot camp, I said, this is the worst fucking mistake I've ever made in my life. If you ever saw the movie Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, it's true, man. Yeah.
That is exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened. And you're standing there thinking, this is a complete nightmare. I remember the DI coming by me, and I thought I was going to get away with it. And just as he was passing me, he took his hand, put it on my face, and smashed my head into the upper bunk, steel. Man, I fucking saw stars, and I thought, good, I hope I can live through this. Now, several months later, I said to myself, as the end of boot camp, I says, damn, I can make myself do anything. It gave me discipline that I could apply to myself, and it has helped me my entire life more than anything I have ever done.
I actually think Stanley Kubrick, probably spent time researching what it was really like to go through boot camp to get it that realistic. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Now, let me get back to the story, though, because I didn't finish it. That ran through my mind, and I thought I was only 17, and that was the right move. He's 15. He'll probably succeed just as well. I says, okay, Dave, I'll help you. And that was it. On his 16th birthday, I remember taking him to the Philadelphia airport. And of course, my wife was with me, and she said to David, I can't believe you're doing this. And I thought, I can believe it. I know why he's doing it. He feels it's his journey. And within maybe 7 months, he was working right next to L. Ron Hubbard. That's how fast he moved up. He was a cameraman on the set, and the rest is history.
Well, yeah, so I'm guessing that the early 1980s, he was in a position of power even then, being that close to L. Ron Hubbard.
Well, I'll tell you what that position was, without getting into all the technical names they have for it. Let me get just a little drink of water here. He was at a point where all the communication that went to L. Ron Hubbard from everywhere in the world went through him. He also was in a position that all the communication from L. Ron Hubbard to the world went through him. So he was at that point of power. He controlled the communication lines of what you would call the source, the person who started this entire entity. That was a position of power. Now, after L. Ron Hubbard died, he ended up going to a hospital. No, wait, was it after or before? Now that I'm thinking about this, it could have been before, it could have been after. But he had to go to a hospital because he had a severe asthmatic attack. I mean, that bad that he needed emergency help. And when he got out, he told the person who took him there, and the person who took him there was Paul Grady. Him and his wife are friends of mine. They live out in L.A. Well, actually, Las Vegas. He said to Paul, he says, Paul, I had an unbelievable realization. And that is this: power is not granted, it is assumed. He assumed the leadership of Scientology. He assumed it. He took people out of the way who opposed him. He put people in place who would follow his orders. And he did this systematically, and he ended up on the top, and that's how he became the leader of Scientology. And then there was a thing where they needed the tax exemption to be handled because the IRS was going to take him down with a bill that they didn't even have the money to pay. He ended up going to see the IRS commissioner and worked it out, got them a tax exemption. That was it. He had ultimate power then.
Yes, he did. That's right. So L. Ron Hubbard passed away in 1986, and I don't believe he left. Well, I guess he left his assets in a will type of will to his family, did he? But he never.
No,
he didn't. Oh, did he not?
No. He didn't leave it to his family. He left it somehow to the church, and the family got a stipend. They get a payment every year. I know this because I speak to one of his children still, and
granddaughter.
They get no, not his granddaughter. I'm treading on ground that I don't want to get into because the person I speak to has my assurance that I'm not going to
fair enough. Yep.
Get into it. And I don't want to violate that. I gave my word, and I'll tell you, truly, if I give my word, I try to keep it. But anyway, they get a stipend, but the majority of the money went to the Church of Scientology. So they immediately ended up with a lot of money, but that still wasn't enough money to cover the IRS bill had it been clamped down on them. But what they did, Kevin, was this. They got hundreds of parishioners to sue individuals in the IRS. They didn't sue the IRS. They sued individuals, hundreds of them. And what was the thing that turned it around is because a person that was with David said, listen, if you grant this, we can turn off all of those lawsuits. And the commissioner says, you can? He says, yes. David called them all off. That was the end of it, and they got the tax exemption. Now, I'm giving you my take on it from everybody who's been there, who told me this. And these are reliable people, and I mean, they wouldn't bend the truth even. So that's what happened, though, and that's how we got it. And at that point, look at power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. It was on his way.
Yes, and that was around the 1993 mark, I think, when they got IRS tax exemption. But like you say, they treat the IRS like they treat their critics and they're all former members. And how do they treat them, Ron?
Well, you're not treated like a king, I can tell you that. You're not treated like a pauper. You're treated like somebody who is owned by the Church of Scientology. It's wild, but that's the feeling that when you're there, if you get out of line, that threat to declare you an SP, lose all your friends, lose your family, you're kept there by the threat of this.
Okay, so what would you, before we get into some of talking a bit more about David, just very quickly, and I should have asked you this before, but what are some of the positive points on Scientology, would you say, or could you say?
Well, I said them many times, even on my program, and I'll say it now. The early things that you get into that are offered, such as the communication course, such as what they call life repair, which is counseling that helps you get over things that have been bugging you, that is occupying your mind. And it's counseling. But I can tell you, if you were to sit down with a friend who didn't say, "Oh, how the hell could you believe that?" who just listened to you and acknowledged it and really believed what you're saying is something that you believed in and acknowledged that, if you sat down with a good friend, you could probably accomplish the same thing. That's not easy to do. There's a thing called the Auditor's Code, and there's maybe 24 or 25 points on it that you have to adhere to if you're going to counsel another person. There's a guy who left Scientology who was up there in the hierarchy, great auditor too, and he said if that was the only thing that LRH was remembered for, it would be great, because it is the way to act as a decent human being to another human being. So these early things are the positive things. But now telling you that you can achieve supernatural qualities like being to exteriorize from your body and look at things at a distance. I've never met one person, and I was in Scientology for 42 years, who could demonstrate that.
Yeah, or they changed the subject when they tried to. Yeah.
Well, no, they pretend that they achieved it. But as an example, one time we were going to go into a room. I was with another Scientologist who had achieved this highest level, and the door was locked. And there was another person with us. I forget what reason, but I remember this particular incident. And the other person said, "Well, look, you're OTA. Just open the door." And the guy said, No, I will never do it, because I did it one time before and the person got sick. I'll never do it again. It's horseshit. Come on. He's lying in so many words, and they pretend otherwise, or they change the subject. That's right.
Obviously, L. Ron Hubbard had his path for Scientology, but David's path seems very different, very destructive in a sense, and we're going to get into that now. But obviously, David's path is, as a chairman of Scientology, almost the leader. Well, he's the leader, right? Has taken on a different path. What do you think if L. Ron Hubbard was here now? Do you think he would have? What do you think he would have thought of what David's done with Scientology?
Well, I think on the major point of all, L. Ron Hubbard would cancel the way they're operating, because it is true that L. Ron Hubbard said, "Look, make your money with Scientology." In other words, train more auditors or counselors, provide more ways for them to achieve this, and so they can audit other people and improve their lives. Right now, the main thrust is getting people to gain a higher status of contribution with giving them a piece of paper. There's no, viable exchangeable product. I give you an example when I say that. If you worked in a car factory and you made automobiles, you could give an automobile to somebody and they would give you money for it. Well, that happens all the time. That has exchangeable to it. Well, if you went in a store, let's say a grocery store, and you bought $100 worth of groceries and handed them a certificate saying that you were this great contributor, they say, "What, are you out of your fucking mind? This is nothing." There's no exchangeable quality to being able to walk in someplace and tell them you've achieved this. But there would be exchangeable quality if you walked in and said, "Listen, I'm a welder. I can weld things, and give me a job. I'll weld stuff. You can sell it." The fact that something has an exchangeable value would be a definition of a product that is useful. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think L. Ron Hubbard would say, "Hey, cut this out, skip this, let's get auditing people again." I think that would be the overall trust if he were to come back.
Yeah, and I don't think David's going to sort of give up his power of science as the head of
No.
Scientology? No, it's just not going to happen.
That will not happen. That will not happen. And I got to tell you, I can't bring myself to hate him. I just can't do it. I know a lot of people would say, you know what, yeah, guy's a monster. He's this and that. There's something about when a child of yours is born, you have that unlimited love for that new person. No matter what they do, you could say, hey, listen, come on, I'll help you, or something like that.
You and your wife and David, you seem that from past interviews that you're all on the same base together before you left, and that was in California. So just correct me with this. What year did you all start living on the same base together? Or what decade?
Me and my current wife?
Oh, well, no, wasn't it Loretta that you was on the California base with?
No, you're talking about Hemet? No, when I went there, Loretta and I had separated. She didn't want to go in the Sea Organization.
Right.
And I did. I joined in 85, and I met my wife there. We got married in 1990. We're married. This summer, we'll be married for 31 years.
So you spent, 12 years on the base then?
Well, no. I mean, I was there from 85 to 2012. She was there. She got there in about 1989. So she was there between then and 2012. So she was there like 30 years, I guess, Yeah.
Why did you move on the base? Why did you decide to do that?
Well, we didn't decide that. When I joined the Sea Organization, that's where I was assigned to go. So when you join, you go where they tell you to go. It's like you're going into service. You're not going to decide which base you're going to be stationed at. And since I was a musician, and of course, David had a lot of pull. He says, now you want to come to the Int base and you can play music in the music organization here. So I went there in 85 to be a musician and an arranger in Hemet, California at the Golden Era Productions base.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So your relationship then with David, I'm guessing, changed quite significantly in those years on the base. I mean, he used to get you to call him sir. The base life was very different as well, wasn't it?
Oh, it was totally different. And I tell you, it almost changed immediately when I got there, because I can remember, I've told this before, but I'll tell it because this was a point that I noticed something's different here. I come out of the music studio, which, it's a facility that he happened to be walking by. He was about 20 yards away, and he was there with his entourage, and I saw him, and I says, hey, Dave. He turned around and looked at me, and I thought to myself, something's changed, and that was it. On that base, when he spoke to me, he called me Ron. He never called me Dad. I was a base staff member first and foremost. On my birthdays, he would send me a note. He'd always get me a nice gift, and it said, "Dear Dad," and I would have a nice birthday, but post-wise, it was always Ron. That was my life there. But what happened over the years? What happened over the years is I began to see him less and less and less. Sometimes he would come to the base, be there for 2 months, and wouldn't even call me. He'd just come there, be there, do his job, leave. And that saddened me more than anything. And to be honest with you, if it weren't that way, I might still be there.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But even when the wage at the time, I don't know what it is now, but the wage at the time for yourself and other members there was about $2,500 a year, right?
Exactly right. That's when you got paid. There were many times you didn't get paid. And when I first went there, it was $30 a week. All right. But as the years went by, we got a raise to $50, which is $47 and change after taxes. Yeah, that's what it was when you got paid. And there were weeks and months sometimes we wouldn't get paid at all.
You've got room inspections, you've got security guards, constant interrogation if you do things wrong. You've got other members reporting you. right? If you have a conversation that's out of context.
Oh yeah, I mean it was Wonderful Life, right out of 1984. You know, I mean, look, you're stating it just like that, but look, there was a fence around the place with barbed wire on it. That barbed wire pointed out and it pointed in. You couldn't drive off the base to go to a store to get something. You had to get it on the internet, and there was a filter on it. If you asked any questions, it would stop you. But you could order things, or you could go to there was a store on the base. You could buy things there. If you sent a letter out, it was open. You would you would send it with it opened. Security would read it. If there's something you couldn't say, they'd send it back. You got to correct it. If you made a call, you had to do it through a reception. The receptionist asked you who you were calling, why you were calling, and then she would listen in on it and write a little note as to what you talked about and send it to security. I mean, it was hell.
And let's also look at this. There's which is your main message on your website. It must stop. Let's not forget that, with the disconnection of your own family members, right?
Yep.
So let's, and also let me add to that as well, is if you came in with children, correct me if I'm wrong here, but those children would be separated from the parents, and even the couple, the man and wife, would maybe go on to different bases.
Absolutely correct. In other words, there was no regard for your relationship with a wife or with a woman with her husband. Okay, you're more qualified to be here. The woman, okay, we're going to send her to Africa, or we're going to send her over to England, and that's where she's going to work. No consideration whatsoever. Your children would be put in a children's organization, and they'd be cared for by a nanny or people who were running it. At this point, I don't think there's anything like that, because all the abusiveness has come out in the public. And there used to be a place near the base called Happy Valley. It was about 2 or 3 miles away, and that's where the children were. And they worked there from morning till night. Punishments would be throwing a bucket of cold water over a kid for somehow doing something right. It just really no care for an individual as a human or as a child.
What's going on inside your head there? Just very quickly. I mean, you're obviously, because I mean, at that time, most of you are doing the courses. I guess you're doing some of the OT levels. I mean, you got to a pretty high OT level. But what's going through your head? I guess you're sort of stuck in that cult mentality, aren't you, in a way?
Well, you are, but you think, look, I can't just say I want to get out of here, because that would have been a lifetime sentence for me. That would have been, now under constant guard 24 hours a day, being security checked until I, quote, came to my senses. In other words, get my mind altered back to being happy, to living in those circumstances. Look, it just happened on a gradient basis. It didn't happen all at once. But I used to say to Becky, we've got to get out of here. This is terrible. She would say, she's the universal optimist.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Right.
She would say, Ron, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. And I would say to her, Becky, if there's a boulder running down the mountain, do you think that boulder is going to stop and run up the mountain? Because if things are bad and they're going bad and nothing changes, it will continue to go in that direction. And that's what happened. And eventually I convinced her. And one day I said, look, we're out of here. And we planned our escape.
Well, actually, it was your son that gave you the Kindle to read the L. Ron Hubbard books. And it was then from the Kindle that you managed to get outside access from, you call it the firewall or whatever it was. It connected outside of what it should have done. And
Kevin, by accident.
Right. Well, or was it?
Oh, it was totally by accident.
Or was it?
I didn't know you.
Was it the university's little message to you to say, look, do you want to know what's going on really?
No, here's what happened. The security guards, David gave me the Kindle. They were trying to get it from me. I says, what are you talking about? It's a gift. The hell with you. God damn it. Now, one night I'm reading a book, and I had the old Kindle. Well, I still have it, where as a mechanical, it goes right, left, up, and down. And if you select a word and push it to the right, it takes you to a dictionary. I held it there just a little bit too long, and it said Google. I was on the internet. And that was it. And once I started reading things, I thought, hey.
So obviously Scientology is a big seductive sort of pull for celebrities. Actually, Tom Cruise gave you birthday presents for your 70th birthday, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How well did you know Tom Cruise and John Travolta?
Well, no, I was very friendly with them. And of course, they were friendly with me, mainly because I was COB's father. I mean, he gave me a little sound system, which was a glass thing with glass speakers. That was wonderful. And he also gave me a fishbowl about this big.
This was Tom Cruise.
Solid glass. Tom Cruise, yeah. And filled with flowers on one of my birthdays. And John Travolta and I got along great. Yeah.
But obviously, do you think if you saw them now, they would not be talking to you? No.
They wouldn't say one word to me.
Right. But Tom Cruise has had the internet years before you ever had that accident with the Kindle. So, he knows what to look up, and he knows all the disparaging information out there. So why is he still staying, as well, do you think?
Him and David are like best friends, okay? He is willing to accept anything and continue their journey to spiritual enrichment, or whatever you want to call it. He will ignore these things as if that's part of the journey. I can't tell you his state of mind, but it could only be that, because there's no way he couldn't know of the abuses that are going on in Scientology, nor can John Travolta.
Do you think
neither of them?
Right.
They both know exactly what's going on.
But you were there behind the scenes many times at the different celebrations throughout the year that Scientology has, and you know what sort of prep work went in to make sure that they had the best experience and everything else. On many occasions, that when they come to Scientology, they only see the best of it, don't they? Or that's
of course.
Yeah.
Okay, you live in France, right? And you're a baron or you're a peasant. Hey, you still both live in France. The life of a peasant is not like that of a baron.
Right. And thank you for that. And I just want to say this as well, which I never mentioned. David did send you, when you left Scientology, he sent you, I believe it was $100,000, and he gave you the inheritance of his mother's estate, his portion of it, for your first wife's, Loretta. Do you think there was bigger reasons why he did that?
I think that was one moment. Well, by the way, that was the inheritance you got from Loretta. Is that what you said?
Yes.
I think he sincerely wanted to help me. I think he sincerely did. And that was one moment. This is why I say there's got to be some love for me that's still there, because there's love I have for him that I can't just say, fuck you, I know a lot of people would say to me, how could you? He's a goddamn monster. He's this and that. He may be. I don't doubt it at all. But as I said earlier on in the program, when that child is born, it hit me like between the eyes. All of my children, I thought, man, I have unlimited love for this human being. And that's I still feel that way. And I don't say what he's doing is correct. I'm against totally the way he's acting and the way he's treated people. Totally. It's unacceptable. But you can't kill. Do you understand what I'm saying, Kevin? I don't know if I'm getting this across even. Though. Do you understand what I mean?
Absolutely. And love is the only true answer in any situation.
That is it. As a matter of fact, I tell you, that seems to be the answer in this universe. If you could love everything, I think everything would go right. I could be totally wrong, and I'll tell you, I always say I reserve the right to be wrong. Okay?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And also, not just the love for others, but love for yourself as well.
Well, if you don't have love for yourself, I don't know how you can have love for another person.
What would you want? Final question. What would you want, or what could you say is the most important message of what you're doing right now, or any important message that you think is really important?
There is a lot of them. And I can tell you, it's going to sound commercial, but I'm going to say it. If you go to my website, therealronmiscavige.com, and look at the story time and life lessons, those messages I give on that are really powerful messages that if they didn't originate with me, I discovered them, and I discovered them from living life. And when you see these, you're going to see if you could adopt this and live your life with these messages, not one, but many, you will lead a better life, and the people around you will lead a better life too. And even animals. I mean, I got 2 cats that, boy, I'll tell you, they hit it lucky when they got me, because one was a little wildcat. She used to hide when I took food into her. Now she eats out of my hand. And the other one could fit in my hand when we got him. He was abandoned. Now he's like 16 pounds, and he's lovable. And this, in answer to your question, what could I say? I don't know. Hold love in your heart, maybe. That would probably be the most important thing of all. Hold love in your heart for yourself in life.
Yeah, that's an important one. Well, Ron, your links are in the description below. They've been coming up on the screen as well. I just want to say thank you for giving us this time right now. I know my audience will appreciate it, and I really appreciate it as well to share your story. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you calling me, Kevin. And to all your listeners, hello for the first time.
Absolutely. And I
thank you for watching.
Yeah, and I hope they come to your channel as well and come subscribe as well. So links are down in the description below, guys. Ron, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.